Hey, Terry, how's it going?
Hey, Mike, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I appreciate you doing this.
Oh, absolutely, man. Thanks for asking.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. So, we are doing this in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, unfortunately. So,
Yes.
how have you and your family been holding up during these crazy
Uh,
times?
we're holding up pretty well. We're hanging in.
That's good. And
Yeah,
you
head
said
down.
you're in what area of Pennsylvania are you in right now?
It's a little south of Pittsburgh, PA, about
Okay.
20 minutes.
How has that area been handling what's been going
Uh,
on?
That's cool, man. It's we're. I don't think we got hit nearly as hard as some of the other places up on the East Coast. Certainly New York
Yeah.
and probably Boston, some of the big metropolitan areas. So we're doing okay. I know they had it pretty well in the city, but you know, we didn't get inundated with people so far.
That's good. Well, it seems to be getting a little bit more back to normal now. I mean, I don't want to say normal because I don't think it'll ever be the way it was, but it seems like
Yeah,
we're getting some semblance of normality coming back
a
a
little
little
bit.
bit.
Yeah,
So we'll see
cross
what
our fingers.
happens. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Cool. So I have a lot of stuff I want to ask you about, but maybe just to start out, could you just take us through some of your early life, where you grew up, how you got interested in the guitar, so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, guitar was always kind of a weird thing for me because I think I discovered it at a really early age. I was literally probably about 2 years old or 3 years old, and I have vague memories of the stuff. But my mom used to play music all the time in the house, and I guess my response to it was that I used to jump around, like a wild man. Just I got really excited by hearing music, and then subsequently, like a year later, I started to ask about certain sounds that I heard or whatever, and then she would say like, oh, this is this group or this group or whatever, explaining it to a 3-year-old. But I discovered not too long after that some of my favorite stuff was uh, Black Sabbath, actually.
Oh, nice.
Um, yeah, as a 3-year-old, and Deep Purple was another big one for me. And I always really liked the heavier sound, I guess, and I didn't know what it was until finally at some point I think somebody told me it was, a guitar, like a couple of years later or whatever. So I mean, since that initial thing, I was like, I gotta play guitar, that's what I want to do, and then somebody said it's a guitar, and I knew what it was. So I asked my parents if I could get lessons, and they were just like, you're too young at the time. I was like
How
8,
old
I
were
guess.
you? Oh, 8. Okay.
Yeah, I was probably around like 8 or something. I was like, I really want to play guitar, and they were like, nah, you're too young, and your hands are gonna not go around the neck and all that kind of stuff. So I kind of gave it up, but I still listened to music. It was super super important. And then probably around 12, I had a friend that started to play, and I came back around and said, hey, can I get lessons? Because back then, of course, in the ancient times, we didn't have YouTube or any of that sort of
Right.
business.
Right.
So they, started doing lessons, and I mean that was pretty much all downhill from there. I mean, literally within weeks, I was like, I love this. This is awesome. Just practice, practice, practice.
That was at age 12.
That was yeah, I think I had just turned 13 around that point. Um,
So at that point, what kind of music were you getting into at that time?
I mean, around then, I think it was sort of guitar music. I had gone through like my big Kiss phase and all that sort of business. Not that that's not guitar music, but as a kid, I liked all that sort of stuff. And then I mean, it was really just I don't know. Like I started to listen to I had been listening to AC/DC, but then it sort of took on a new meaning that I started to play guitar, because I mean it was interesting as a guitarist as well. So that was a big initial thing. And then I heard these some other guitar players that were just like at the time blowing my mind. Van Halen, of course, was one of them, but the sort of the predominant reason that I really wanted to play guitar at that stage was Randy Rhoads, from Ozzy's group at the time.
Nice.
So that was a huge influence on me and a huge motivational factor. So I was listening to all that stuff, and it was my dream that I could, play anything remotely like Randy Rhoads one day.
Mhm. Who were
Uh,
your early teachers starting out?
there was a teacher that lived here that was probably the biggest influence on me and my mentor and all that sort of thing. And his name was Tony Janflone. Um, was a local person from the area. Just I mean, a fantastic teacher. I mean, more than that. I mean, he just really opened my eyes to a lot of different things, a lot of different musical things. So to this day, I still have to absolutely give him credit for, I mean, really helping me
Mhm.
develop and putting me on the right path. Back in the day.
And this was in Pittsburgh, you said?
This was in Pittsburgh, yeah.
Awesome.
Well, in Washington is the name of the town down where he was. But yeah, he was definitely my first and probably greatest of all, influences, as far as teachers and everything. But throughout the years, I mean, I've definitely had some great people. I had studied under another guy down here at Duquesne University for a little bit. His name was Bill Peirce, great teacher as well, who definitely hit me to a lot of cool things. And of course, at Berklee, I met a lot of great teachers up there.
Yeah,
As
and
well.
yeah, so I want to get into the Berklee thing definitely. So at a certain point, you start to get a lot more serious about playing. So was that prior to going to Berklee, or did you kind of have
Yeah.
a fire lit once you got there?
No, I was like deadly serious from like age 13, I think. When I started to play, like I said, after a couple of weeks, I mean, I was like, starting to practice, I guess. Um, I mean, hours and hours and hours a day. And then like subsequently, like, maybe a year into it, I read interviews from like, I discovered, in quotes, like Yngwie Malmsteen and, would read interviews like with Yngwie and some other guys like that. And they were, Yngwie was like, oh man, I used to practice, 8 hours a day. And I was like, man, if that dude has to practice 8 hours a day, then I at least have to practice 10 hours a day, So I would just all day long just play and practice and whatever. And so, yeah, by the time it was time to go to college, I mean, I was already
Hmm.
fully ensconced into like, this is what I want to do.
So what kind of stuff would you practice at that time? Was it a lot of like exercises with a metronome, trying to develop speed and technique and stuff like that?
Yeah, it was a ton of that stuff because those were the guys that I really started to listen to. After Andy Rhodes, it was probably well, I think actually at the same time it was Gary Moore was another huge initial influence on me. Not so much like the later stuff that he did with the blues stuff, but like Gary's metal phase. So
Yeah.
I mean, he was I mean, you listen to some of that stuff now, man, and the guy, I mean, he's picking the whole 9 yards. It's like way ahead of his time. So I would practice all that stuff. I would practice all the Gary Moore licks and, metronome them out. And then, of course, after that, it was Yngwie and Paul Gilbert and some of those guys. And that stuff is all super technical. So, I mean, it was a lot of metronome, a lot of working the chop stuff out. And then also a lot of figuring things out by ear, I think was another thing that I used to do all the time.
Would you learn a lot of solos and stuff like that by ear?
Um, yeah, not so much like the solos. I mean, I would from time to time I'd pick something and I would try to learn a little bit, but I learned like I don't know, like I learned I guess just like bits and pieces of licks and if it were like the riff, to a song or something like that, I would do that.
Mhm.
And it was more of like I can't really even describe it. It's more of the spirit of things, I guess, than anything else. Like I would kind of
Mhm.
learn sort of what Yngwie was doing, and then I would kind of throw my own 2 cents into the thing and try to come up with something.
That's great. I mean, it seems like you were wise beyond your years with that, because I feel like that's the goal. You hear something that catches your ear and you take a little bit from it, try to make it your own. You know.
I think you're right, and I think I was just talking to somebody about that too. That I think that's one thing I feel like that's kind of missing in today's guitar playing, like when people are growing up, because everything is very like right out in front of you. Here's YouTube. I mean, you want to learn Paul Gilbert. I mean, there's Paul is right on YouTube going like, here's what I did, and you're like, oh wow, okay, cool. So everybody plays that stuff. Everybody, we're locking up here a little bit. Everybody plays that stuff pretty exacting nowadays.
Right. Right. And it
Um,
doesn't seem like you need to investigate it as much now, like you would have to back in the day, because, I feel like those days, like you said, where you practice 10 hours a day, I feel like a big part of that is probably having to actually sit down and figure a lot of stuff out on your own, because you don't have all these resources that everybody has now. So I can imagine a lot of the kids now not really being as devoted to 10-hour practice days. Maybe I'm wrong, but
100%, man. I'm sure that there are still a lot of kids that are practicing 10 hours, but it's a different type of thing. I think it
right.
was George Lynch that Lynch had said something about the way that people really developed a voice on the instrument back in those times. And I mean, he's even, my predecessor, was that you had to figure things out and you didn't really always get them exact. You could kind of hear it, but maybe sometimes you couldn't, and maybe sometimes you just didn't care. Like in my case, I was like, yeah, it's close. I'm going to put something else in here, whatever. And then through that process, I think you really kind of start to develop like your own voice, on the
Right.
instrument, as opposed to like I play exactly the thing that, Yngwie did
Right.
on this thing or whatever.
Right. And back then too, they didn't really have programs for like slowing stuff down, right?
Yeah, huh? No, no,
Yeah.
huh?
It's crazy. I remember, I think you were the one that told me this story when I was at National Guitar Workshop. I think you said back in the day you would record some solo stuff, and if you needed to do a harmonized guitar part, you would record one part on one tape recorder and one on the other, and then you'd play them at the same time with another tape recorder in the middle. Is that true?
Yeah, you could work harmonies out that way. I had like two like really cheap, like I had a boombox and a ghetto tape recorder or whatever, and I would sit there and try to work the harmonies out because I was like, I wonder if I could, when I would play the part and I put the part on and I'd, try to play
That's
something
awesome.
over top of it, while I was playing the other one, so that it would record into the next, tape machine or whatever.
That's awesome. That'd be great for like for nowadays. I feel like that would be great for like a sketch comedy little skit,
I know there's
recording. That's great.
probably, I mean, probably most of the stuff that happened back then, Mike, would be almost like a Spinal Tap moment now,
Oh yeah, I remember VHS tapes, and VHS tapes seem to just be like a comical thing now when you think about them
Totally,
compared to where. Um,
totally.
yeah. So you went to Berklee. Did you go to Berklee right after high school?
Yeah, yeah, right out of high school. Next year I popped into Berklee and stayed for 4 years, and there you go.
And so what? I'm not too familiar with like the programs at Berklee and stuff like that. So what kind of degree did you get there?
It's a Bachelor of Music,
Okay.
otherwise known as a BM.
So is that something where do you have to take like non-music classes as well, or is it pretty much just all music focused?
You do have to take non-music classes. Yeah, if you go for I think they have a diploma program as well, and you don't do any of the, the educational things from there. But
Mhm.
the other one, the bachelor program, you definitely have to do that.
Mhm. So as far
So
as like Berklee, the environment at Berklee for a guitar player is like, what types of classes were you taking there?
guitar classes, I mean, they have everything. Well, no, I shouldn't even say guitar classes. I should say, music classes, because that's one of the things that was weird for me at first as a guitar player and as the type of guitar player that I was. I mean, I wanted to practice my, you know, alternate picking and my arpeggios and get crazier ideas than I was ever doing and, push the limits on that kind of thing. And then I got to Berklee and it literally was, I think the first couple semesters even, like I didn't bring my guitar to a single place, with the exception of like I had a sight reading lab and a chord lab, and that wasn't so exciting for me at the time. It's
Right.
like, well, I'm gonna go sight read with my guitar, but like where's the guitar wizard that's gonna like
Right.
I'm gonna sit with him and he's gonna show me all this really crazy stuff. That's what I'm trying to do. But after a while, you understand like what the program actually is. It's like you're not a guitar player, you're a musician, and that's what they're trying to do. So we did everything from like music notation. I had a class on that to arranging, which was a whole mind explosion thing for me when I got there, to ear training, harmony, all that kind of stuff.
Because I remember when I was looking at colleges, I was looking at some of the stuff on the Berklee website, and they had like some classes that were very specific. It would be like guitar in the style of Kurt Rosenwinkel or something like that.
Yeah.
Did you take any classes like that?
So those are usually the guitar labs, and what they are not, they're not necessarily. I mean, I guess they're part of the core curriculum or whatever, but I almost think of them as like a sort of a separate thing, because the core is like kind of some of the ones that I mentioned before. Like you have your
Mhm.
your harmony and you go through. I'll be locked up here, I think. But yeah, so the core classes were the harmony, and you have a bunch of levels of that, and I mean, even arranging, there's multiple levels. Classical, traditional harmony, there's multiple levels. So the other ones are the sort of the more performance specific oriented things or whatever, and you have in the style of this player, or I took like country lab, I think,
Oh, nice.
was one of them, and I took I can't even remember half the labs now. Triad Improv Lab or something like that. They have a real specific things like once you get into that
Mhm.
stuff, and you're required to take, I think, two of them or one of them a semester. I can't remember what it
Cool.
is.
Cool. So you go to Berklee for 4 years and then you graduate. So what did you initially do after college?
Um, I kind of walked around in a stupor is what I did after college, because I sort of up to that point, I mean, I had a real clear cut goal of like, practicing every day to get to college. And then I get to college and I'm like, I got to work on all this stuff to graduate college. And, and then you get done and it's sort of like, huh, okay. So I stayed in Boston for a year, and everybody else I knew moved. And so it was just kind of a weird year of trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. And then, meantime, I was, writing songs and recording songs and all that kind of stuff, still making music.
Hmm.
But my band that I had been playing with, they all moved. And two of the guys, the drummer and the bass player, had moved down to the New York metropolitan area. And the drummer was a real good friend of mine. So he said, "Hey man, just, why don't you move down here?" And then
Is
another
that
friend said, "Hey, I'm
Greg?
looking." Greg, yeah. And another friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm looking for a roommate down in New York City. Why don't you move to?" And the two things just sort of, coincided. And I was like, "Yeah, I think it's a time to do this." So I moved to New York basically the year after that.
And that's New York City, or?
New York City, yep.
Nice.
New
And
York
what
City.
were
I
you
moved down.
just teaching and playing at that time?
Yeah, teaching and playing. It's pretty much
Mhm.
it. Teaching, playing, same deal. I had my home recording stuff and was working on, music. And we sort of reformed the band down there, but lost the bass player. He couldn't really commit to a bunch of stuff. The singer at the time had stayed up in, he was from Boston. So he's one of the only guys that still stayed around. But we, at first, for about the first year, we reformed the band down there. We sort of had it together, and the singer would kind of drive back and forth to do like a rehearsal, and then we'd book a gig. But soon the bass player, like I said, couldn't do it, and the singer was kind of way the heck, out and just having trouble with us connecting and him getting down and having the time to be able to rehearse and all that kind of stuff. So we ended up, the drummer and I just kind of put our heads together and put ads in the Village Voice and started looking for other people.
Hmm.
So
So was this original stuff or covers?
yeah, no, original stuff.
Okay.
We
So
were
all the stuff that you write that's on your albums, like that type of stuff?
sort of. Not, maybe not quite as definitely not as instrumental. We were doing vocal music, and it was a little more, not quite as intense, I think, as some of the just crazy instrumental stuff or whatever.
Hmm.
So we did that type of thing.
Cool. And then at what point did you start working at National Guitar Workshop?
I think it was, I want to say it was 19, I think it was, I think it was 1990, 1989 or 1990. I think it was 1990. I'd been in college, I think, for a year or two. I think it was the second summer that I was in college. Um, I started working there.
And did you work there until they closed?
Yes.
That's awesome. So who was there initially when you first started, like as far as guitar, like the shredder guys, who was there when you first started working there?
I mean, as far as the teachers, I don't think anybody was doing that there. And that's the reason that they called me, because they needed a rock guy. Nobody else wanted to teach 6 sections of metal improv, during the day. So, and that sounded cool to me. They were like, "Hey, so, you want to?" I was like, "I'm in." And I think it was mutually beneficial for everybody. So as far as that, there were really nobody. But the students at the time, um, were, it was kind of crazy because of the time period, I think. So everybody, I mean, 9 out of 10 students that came into my room, I mean, they were like totally into the Wheatley stuff, and totally just over the top with the chop stuff.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
They
because
were
when I
locked
was
up in a
there,
room.
it was you, Dave Martone, and James Hogan were like the three big, for the like the
Mhm.
shredding and stuff like that. Um, and that, I mean, that was an amazing experience for me because you were the first teacher I had when I ever went to that camp, and when I first heard you play, that really kind of, ignited something in me that really inspired me to want to practice more. So, I always, appreciated that about your
Mhm.
playing, and
Thank you,
grateful
Mike.
for that.
I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were at National Guitar Workshop, the way, for people that don't know, it's a camp, it's a summer camp, and the way that it works is it every week they have a different guest artist that comes, or is it just once during the summer? How does that work with the guest artists?
It's changed. Like when I first started there, and for definitely the first bunch of years, maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, maybe even, they used to have 2 guest artists a week. And so like, and that's the thing that blew my mind about being there too, was like we'd have, and they were, I mean, for guitar guys, I mean, they were like, like, I mean, where else are you going to see these guys
Right.
and actually talk to them and all that kind of stuff? So we'd have like, Greg Howe and Marty Friedman one week, and I don't remember some of the guys, you know, John Petrucci and Reb Beach the next week. And like, it was just amazing, you know, to be able to have these guys come in and then actually talk to them. And then, you know, of course to play with them and hang with them and all that kind of stuff too. And I think it was definitely the first place of its kind to be able to do that. And that was the real, the big draw, you know, I think for a lot of people.
Yeah. In hindsight, one thing that I'm still kicking myself over is, you know, eventually I got more into jazz, but back when I
Mhm.
was going to NGW, I was really into the metal and stuff like that. And I really didn't appreciate jazz, but I remember I went there one time during the jazz week, and the two people that they had on the same week, they had Pat Metheny and John Schofield. And
Yeah.
like I went and watched it, and like it was cool, but like I wouldn't have appreciated it the way I would now back then,
Right.
you know. So, but like looking back, I'm just like, I can't even believe that they were able to get both those guys in 1 week. It's just
Yeah.
insane.
Absolutely, man. They've had some really, really great people that have come in, and I have to say that, I mean, sadly, like, you know, I had a lot of the same experiences, you know, with some of that stuff. You know, my even as a teacher, my head was not necessarily in certain you know, places to be able to appreciate things, and so I would miss opportunities, you know. And I'm also, it was just sometimes, like, you know, I was so tired from teaching and blah blah blah, this and that or whatever, that I would just miss something, you know, and not take advantage of the opportunity. I remember there was one year that Shawn Lane he did a week long intensive, like, seminar, week long, and I didn't go because it was the week right before the rest of the normal summer started.
Hmm.
Um, so, you know, I should have just gone up for the week and hung out. It would have been fine. But I'm like kicking myself now. I'm like, man,
Oh, you weren't actually on the campus when it was happening?
no, But we could have, you know, as teachers, we could have gone up and hung out, and it would have been cool. But I didn't take advantage of it, and I really, really should have. He was there in the transition. He did a concert that night, so we all went to see the concert, and I mean, it was like mind altering. You know
I can't even imagine.
how insane it was. You know, I talked to him briefly, you know, and I was just, you
What
know.
year was that?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. It must have been, I want to say it was maybe like late 90s.
Was he doing like a lot of the Powers of 10 stuff?
Yeah, I think he did some stuff off of that.
Mm.
I don't know the names of the songs, but I remember hearing some of the stuff on the album. So I think it was right around that time period, maybe, or something. But
That's
that's just a funny story about it. Like, we literally, the teachers were in the back row, some of us. I mean, some of these guys are really, really good players, you know. And like, I remember it's like looking to my left and looking to my right, and like everybody was like with their jaw just hanging open, you know. And
hmm
then he gets done with the show, and you know, everybody's kind of filing out, and he gets on the drum kit just to kind of goof around. And the guy's playing, like, I mean, it was nuts. He's playing like this double bass stuff at, like, you know, 16ths at like 200. I mean, just crazy, like, you know, like
Wow.
going nuts on the kit. And then, like, you know, 2 minutes later, he like hops over to the grand piano that was in the recital hall or whatever, and he starts playing, like, literally, I think he was playing a Rachmaninoff piece. I'm like, I was like, I went home and back to my dorm, and I was like, literally, like, I don't even understand what just happened. You know, it's like
Yeah.
that amazing.
Yeah, that guy's from on another planet. It's so sad too that he never really got any, you know, big recognition. I feel like, you know, in the guitar community, people know who he is, but you know, beyond that, I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
such an amazing talent. It's unfortunate not more people know who he is.
no, for sure. He's absolute genius, that guy.
Did you have any? Did you meet Buckethead when you were at the
I
camp?
did, yeah. And that funny story is that he, you know, did a fantastic clinic, and I thought at the time, you know, because right at that time we had just been, I don't want to say we had been in a magazine together, but we sort of had. He was the cover story, and I was not the cover story, but I was in the same issue of it was kind of like a guitar, I think it was Guitar World, like shred issue or something. And so they had Buckethead and Ingve as the big guys, and then they had, you know, myself, and I think Dave Martin was in there, and Rusty Cooley, and maybe Joe Stump, somebody else, I can't remember. Um, so anyway, I thought maybe that would be a good parlay to be able to talk to him, you know, so that he's not thinking, you know, like, who's this guy or whatever. And so I went to, you know, go to the backstage area or whatever, that I'm always back and forth in anyway, but, you know, his bodyguard or whatever was outside, and he said, no, you can't go back yet. You know, it's okay. You know, it's fine. So finally, after a couple of minutes, I go back, and I was, you know, wondering, I'm thinking, like, maybe he's going to take the bucket off, and we're just going to be like people, you know what I mean? Cause it's like, I'm a guitar player, you're a guitar player. Let's just talk for a little bit. And, you know, so I walk in, and he's got the bucket and the raincoat and everything. And I was just like, hey, you know, first of all, I wanted to say, you know, did a fantastic job. I mean, I love your playing. You know, it was great. The clinic was fantastic. You know, really, really, really positive stuff that you're doing. And you know, my name is Terry. I was just in, you know, literally just in this month, the magazine that you were in. You know, I don't know if you read that stuff, but just wanted to sort of make the connection. You know, I really, you know, whatever. And he basically just was kind of doing hand signals. You know, he's like this, you know, and then he was like, you know, like, so I kind of stood there for a minute, and you know, I'm looking at the cold white mask of you know, in the KFC bucket, and there's this uncomfortable silence, and that was pretty much it. I said, okay, well, I'm just gonna hit the road, man. Thanks, you know, thanks for talking. See you.
So it really was a full-time gimmick for him.
Yeah, I think so. I think so at the time, at least. I don't know. I heard he took the bucket off now or something, but.
Oh, really? I heard that he has some health problems right now.
Yeah, I saw that he was doing some interviews with maybe without the bucket. I can't remember if that's the truth or whatever, but I'd heard that he had some health issues and, you know, was sort of reassessing, I guess, things, and, you know.
Well, since you've had experiences both with Buckethead and Paul Gilbert, can you give us any insight into the conspiracy that they're the same person? Do you have any ideas?
They're not the same person.
Okay, we can put that
Buckethead is,
to rest.
yeah, Buckethead's name is Brian Carroll, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a Spotlight guy back in the day, at Spotlight column. I think he was in there too. So I heard that he had studied under Paul, or Paul had given him some lessons or something. But he is an entity unto himself.
Was that the master class where he was having Bootsy Collins answer the questions for him? Yeah, that was hilarious.
That's like one of those like weird dream sequences. It's like, you know, I had this crazy dream last night. It was like Buckethead doing a clinic, and Bootsy Collins was like narrating the whole thing and translating. But it was actual reality. That was the crazy part.
Well, it's funny because the meet and greet afterwards, I went and I met him, and it was the exact same thing that you said. Like he just waved, he nodded his head. There was no talking whatsoever.
I was really wanting to see what was going to happen during the clinic, because I was like, he's going to do a guitar clinic and try to answer questions. How's that going to, like, you know? But they sort of fielded it. You know, they did it pretty well, and you know.
From a marketing perspective, I mean, it's genius what he's doing, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that would just go to see something like that just out of curiosity to see how it would turn out.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I heard that he did it in the first place just because he was really kind of uncomfortable with being on stage, and you know, that was a great way to sort of, you know, hide or whatever. I don't know if that's truth or not, but I mean, it sort of strikes a chord. I mean, I think we've all felt a little anxious being on stage and everything at times, you know. So I can totally respect that. He came up with a great plan.
It's got to be interesting too if he's coming in and out of venues, especially if they don't have like a back entrance that he can come through. Like I saw him one time at Toad's. You know, are you familiar with Toad's Place in New Haven?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw him there, and there's no back entrance. You have to walk through the main area, and I figured, all right, if he walks through without his mask, I might see him because he's so tall. So I was just looking for like a really tall guy, and I didn't see anybody. And then at a certain point, he just came out. So I don't know if he gets to the venues like hours before so he can miss everybody, but that's got to be challenging to maneuver around that.
Yeah. It's got to be tough, man. I mean, it's got to be tough to keep that up for a long time, you know.
Yeah, it's like those wrestlers that never take their masks off, and it's a huge mystery what they look like.
Absolutely, man. Or like Kiss in the 70s, you know.
Yeah,
it's like they couldn't go out in public without, you know, something. I remember seeing pictures of Gene Simmons, like when he was out with, you know, Cher or whoever he was dating at the time, and he was like wearing bandanas around his face, you know, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, now everyone's doing that. Face masks or bandanas.
Yeah, right.
So
Gene was like way ahead of his time on it.
Yeah.
If only we had a problem that made us all wear Kiss makeup.
Yeah, who knows? With the way things are going, that, you know, that might become normal at a certain point. Things are getting so weird. Who knows?
That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, right. So this might be kind of a tough question. Do you have a favorite guest artist that you saw when you were at National Guitar Workshop?
Yeah, that is a tough question. I mean, different people for different reasons. You know, certainly one that comes to mind is Holdsworth, because I mean, I've been talking to the staff for years about Holdsworth, and I'm like, man, you guys have to get Holdsworth. You guys have to get Holdsworth. And finally, one year it just came together or whatever. So I mean, for me that was super exciting. You know, absolutely great to I mean, obviously watch him play, you know, like right in front of you with his band. He brought his band with him, so that was fantastic. On the NGW stage, you know, so it was like crazy. But and then we get to, you know, with most of these guys, we get to hang out with them a little bit as well. I mean, during the performances and all that, sometimes we play with them and whatnot. And then of course afterwards, like we would go out and, get some dinner or hang out and talk about stuff or whatever. So that was really a highlight to be able to go hang out with Alan and just, talk about weird stuff with him.
Was he there on the Jazz Week?
He was there. I can't remember if it was Jazz Week or if he actually, and this is going to be funny, but I used to teach the rock fusion thing for a while. Before James, who is well more suited for that kind of stuff than I am, took it over. But he might have been there for that class.
Okay.
Which,
nice.
Like I said, it's funny because I'm the farthest thing from, like a great jazz player. So.
I hear a lot of interesting stuff in your playing, though. I mean, I have some questions about that once we get more into that. But one last thing about NGW as well. Do you have any funny Zakk Wylde stories that you'd be willing to share?
I have many funny Zakk Wylde stories. It would probably take us all night. He only had one summer that he was there for a day, and that was like sort of a neutron bomb went off or something. And actually the funny part about that is that it was my very first very first summer there, and very first guest artist, of any of that sort of thing. And so that was my welcome to the NGW was Zakk Wylde. And myself and another teacher, Jeff Mackerlin, were responsible for Zakk, so to speak. Because back in the day, they would, usually it was, if it were a rock guy, it was me, or it was me and Jeff, or, something like that. We would have to sort of make sure they were cool during the day, get them what they needed, and then take them out at night and all that kind of stuff. And the short of it is that I've never seen any other human being in my life consume that much alcohol. It was just absolutely astounding in amounts. And the guy was just larger than life. I mean, even back then, that was like, what did I say, 89 or 90 or something, even back then, I mean, he was absolutely larger than life. And, we went into the town of New Milford, and that was an experience because we just walk into Burger King, and I mean, he's just big and he's got this strut that he does, and he's just like, hey man, what's going on? Like that, and everybody's like backing up and looking at him and then just drinking all day. That's all he did was drink. He got on the stage at night and did his concert, and that was the best memory I have of that, other than him playing the solo to all the solos to Hotel California like 4 or 5 times in a row, was he just started like spouting off all this. And I mean, there's a lot of kids in the audience, so everybody tried to keep it sort of PG rated, when they're doing their performances and stuff. And I mean, he just was going on. I mean, dropping the F-bomb everywhere and using his cup as like I don't even know what to call that, like he was actually, taking a whiz on the audience, spitting in the air, like everything you see him do, like on the Aussie stage, he did on the NGW stage. And I look back and I saw, Dave, the person that owned the camp, and some of the office staff, and their faces were just like ghost white. And you could see the look on their faces. It was kind of like, how do we can't stop this train.
Right.
Like it's already going, and we can't stop it, so. But it was fun. It was absolutely fun, like, hanging out and watching him. So.
Holdsworth is a big drinker too, right? Or he was?
Yeah.
More of just a beer guy.
I think so. He didn't, of course, he didn't get. Yeah, he's just a beer guy. He didn't get absolutely tanked before he went on the NGW stage. So there's that.
Right.
But yeah.
Because I think towards the end of his life, he was brewing his own beer.
That's what I heard. Yeah, he was doing his own brewing stuff. Nice. And cycling too, I think, was his other.
Nice. That's one of my biggest regrets. I never saw him before he passed away. That's one of my biggest regrets, because I mean, to see that live, I can't even imagine what that experience must have been like. Just as far as like in terms of just the inspiration, just seeing something like that in person.
It was unbelievable, Mike. I mean, it was literally unbelievable. I was right on the side of the stage, because we were all sort of standing backstage, watching him from the side, and it was like, I mean, just hearing that stuff come off that stage. I mean, I played that stage like so many times, and hearing that come off of the stage, it was like, geez, that's amazing,
Yeah, that's awesome. So here, I want to get into talking about some of your albums because this is, I couldn't believe the timing of this. I asked you if you wanted to do this interview, and then like a couple of days later, I see you post on Facebook that you have a new album coming out. So I couldn't be
Yeah,
more excited about that. So
thank you.
not including this album, you have 3 other albums.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I've done a bunch of like demo stuff, over the years. I mean, that's always been going on since like the 80s, and just throwing them out there.
Hmm.
But the hopefully the quality has gotten better over the years. And I put out I mean, I think the first actual like CD thing I did was years ago, and that was a 4-song thing. And then the
Is
next
that
one was
Obscura?
yeah, and then the next one was a thing called which
Hmm.
was I think early 2000s, and then the last thing was Moschino's, and that was 2011 or 2012, I think it was.
Hmm. Yeah, so
So
Obscura, can Obscura be found anywhere? Because I have it on CD. I bought it when I was at the workshop, but I can't find anything online of that
I
album.
don't think it's around. Yeah, I don't think it's around anywhere. And I know that like a lot, especially because it was I don't even know if that was digitized or not. I mean, I imagine they must have. But I had it up at CD Baby and a couple of those types of places,
Hmm.
for sale, the physical product or whatever. And I know that they send me an email, and so they're trashing all their physical product stuff, and that's not going to happen anymore. So
Yeah, it's sad that
yeah,
CDs are becoming obsolete.
I
That's
know.
something that makes me upset. I love CDs.
Me too, man. Me too. I like records, but
Yeah, well,
you know,
records seem to be making a little bit of a comeback.
there's a cool like edgy thing to it, I guess. To
Right.
have vinyl or whatever. That's cool. But
I'm waiting to
yeah,
see if VHS will have a comeback as well. I'm
VHS, man, it
not banking on it, but
might have its day. You never know.
I never know. I'm holding on
Oh,
to them. Who knows? Maybe they'll be worth money someday. You know.
yeah, they could be.
Obscura. I mean, one of my favorite things about I think the first track, "To the Peril of Low Flying Birds," that's
Yeah.
track 1, right? That's one of those songs. To this day, I've never been able to figure out the time signature of that song. That one just messes with my head so much. I'll think I have it, and then the riff kind of turns around, and I just have no idea what's going on in that. But do you remember what the meter is on that?
I think it's like just 5 and 7. I don't know. It's been probably about 20 years since I've actually heard it. So I'm trying to remember the riff though, but I think it's 5. I think it's just 5 and 7, just alternates. And then it might do something like, repetitive 5 and 7 pattern. And then every so often that the pattern repeats, the measure of 7 becomes a measure of 6 or 8 or something like that.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I'll have to go find the CD and see if I can
yeah,
count the
sing
fives and
along.
sevens. Yeah. So that's your first album, Obscura, and that was you did program drums on that one, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then Om, is that how you say it? Is it Om?
Yeah,
Because I know it's the vibration, right? The Om, right? It's the same
that's
same
right.
word.
Yep.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was Om or Om.
Yeah, I've heard it pronounced a bunch of different ways, but I'm
So
from
that I
I'm
mean,
from
go
Western
ahead.
Pennsylvania, so it's probably more like Alm.
So that I mean that one has in terms of like the percussion and stuff, that has much more of an Eastern kind of sound to it. Were you exploring a lot of Indian music prior to making that album?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I got really just vibed out on a bunch of that stuff at some point, and I think it was probably back at Berklee. I started listening to some things, and I'm not even sure what did it, other than I can say that I somebody at some point or somehow I got into the Shakti stuff with John McLaughlin, and I just totally fell in love with it. I was like, man, this is like the greatest stuff I've ever heard in my life. Um, so through that, then I started to kind of investigate. I was like, well, some of the players on there, like Zakir Hussain and El Shankar, like I was like, man, I mean, these guys have albums, so let me go. So I would check their solo stuff out, and then through that, I would check out other things. Some of the stuff I don't really even know. Um, I can't say like I checked out this specific performance by this guy because I know he's a
Right.
fantastic, Ben Suri player or something,
Right.
But I literally would go to Tower Records and I would be like, okay, you know, let me pick out something here that looks pretty cool and interesting, and I would just buy the CD and then I would go home and check it out. And some things were just amazing,
Hmm.
some of the stuff that I found was fantastic. Some of it was like almost orchestral, like where they would have like an entire ensemble of people, whatever. And it was just,
Hmm.
I don't know, it was exciting at the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you ever listen to any of the later Shawn Lane stuff where he started incorporating some Indian with
Yeah.
Jonas Hallberg?
Yep. Absolutely. There's that whole thing. I think it's the Paris concert that he did.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and then they did another album or something as well. And that stuff is awesome. I loved
Yeah,
it.
beautiful stuff.
Yep,
Yeah, and
absolutely.
you see videos of that too, and you could tell he was really sick at that point. I mean, he gained a
Yeah,
lot of weight, and he couldn't
right.
stand when he was playing. It's sad to see him in that state, but it seemed I thought that was a really cool um, genre for him to kind of explore towards the end of his life. I thought that was a really nice,
I
you
did
know,
too, man. I thought that was a really nice combination of those guys playing together.
yeah,
Because I mean, Jonas is a great, obviously great bass player. Plays in that style, and then you've got the other guys who play in the traditional Indian style, and then you got Shawn Lane, who I don't even know what style you want to call that, but
right.
it's Shawn.
Mm-hmm.
So that mixture to me was like, I was like, man, that is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So then your third album, Machine Elves, that one, are you using a 7-string on that one?
Yeah, a bunch.
Nice.
Yep.
Are we going to hear the 7-string on the new album?
You were going to hear a lot of 7-string on the new album.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
So like looking at these albums, what I've noticed is you kind of have like a nice amount of space in between each album. It's like Obscura was 2001, then you have 4 years go by, then you have and then 2012 is Machine Elves, and now you're doing this new album 2020. Did between Machine Elves and this new album, did something sort of spark the creativity for this album?
Yeah, I don't know. I had a bunch of scenes, like as I was finishing up Machine Elves, because it's more of a vocal band kind of thing or whatever. I mean, I started to kind of have, I don't know what you want to call it, but just an itch to like write some instrumental stuff, or at least that's what started to happen. As I was sitting down at the guitar, I mean, that stuff was kind of coming out. So I had a bunch of ideas and a bunch of riffs, and I started to kind of put some things together. And then, I mean, it takes me so long to do this. I mean, I'm just a chronic procrastinator for one, and there's a bunch of other reasons I won't get into, but it just takes me a while to get to the point where I want to write something or I want to do something. And it's been a long process. So I write a little bit here, write a little bit there, write a little bit there, different periods of time, and then finally, with this the COVID stuff that's been going on now, I really kind of had a vision that I wanted to get a couple people in particular to play on this one. And so I sort of figured I wasn't quite ready to give the stuff out to everybody, to check it out and say, hey, do you want to play on this or whatever? But I'm like, I should probably do this now because most of these guys are going to be, less busy, I guess, now than they would be, before this or, maybe even after, hopefully. So,
and that's one thing that I'm hoping will be a positive thing that comes out of this pandemic is a lot of people will start, making more because everyone has so much more time. Hopefully we'll get a lot of
yeah,
good music that comes out of this.
I hope so, man. I hope so. I hope there is some positive like that, and that
Mhm.
certainly would be one of the best things to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good new
So
music.
yeah. So I've always loved your compositions, and I think your writing style is a lot more complex than a lot of typical shred guys, just in terms of like the odd meter stuff and the overall structures of the song and the harmonies that you use. Who are some of your biggest influences when it comes to songwriting?
Man, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, literally, there's so many things, and it depends on what mood I'm in and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it can be anything. I mean, there's a lot of obviously, there's a lot of the prog stuff, but for me, the prog stuff is usually the older things. So, I mean, I love, King Crimson, ELP, Yes, Genesis, Tall, Kansas, I mean, all that sort of stuff. So I listen to a lot of that stuff. And then, I mean, I don't really do so much of the guitar stuff anymore or listen to it. Not because, I don't know, I hate when guitar players say that, like, I don't really listen to guitar playing anymore. I feel like I listen to so much of it for me that it's like, I don't necessarily want to hear so much of that. So
Mhm.
it's more, band oriented stuff or whatever, but it can be anything as progressive as that. I mean, I like, um, stuff from all styles, really. I mean, it depends.
Mhm.
People will turn me on to things. They'll say, hey man, you want to check this out? And I mean, I'm like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. I really dig that,
Mhm.
traditional music from other countries, like we were just talking about, that's inspirational. Um, so yeah, I don't know. And I mean, still metal, they're still at the core of it. They're still metal for me. I mean, I
Right.
still love, certain bands. A lot of it I think is getting kind of repetitive, but I mean, there are certain bands like Meshuga, even though they kind of do that thing. I mean, for me, I mean, I love them. I still love them.
Oh,
Um,
insane.
I think they're so unique that I'll always love them. Opeth is another one. I think that's really, for me, it's been great, to
Yeah.
hear what they come up with.
One of the things that's always amazed me about Meshuga too is the longevity that they've had as a band. Because I think their first album was like in '91, and I don't
Yeah.
know if is it all original members still?
No, I don't think so. I know that I don't know what's going on with Frederick now, but Per Nelson is the interim guitar player, or maybe the permanent guitar player. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, because Frederick played on the last album, right?
Mhm.
So if they release a new album, Frederick won't be on it at this point.
I'm curious to see, and I don't know Per well enough to email him. I think um, to investigate his personal dealings. Like
Right.
so I don't want to bother him with that. But I love him in the band. I mean, I love Frederick too. But
Yeah.
Paris just sort of brings something else to it as well. So it'd be cool to hear an album with him doing the
Yeah.
guitar.
Have you ever met Frederick?
Never met him. No. He was another guy that I was trying to get to the NGW.
Hmm.
And I don't know that they ever contacted him, but I did a couple times, and just sort of explained to him what it was. And he was sort of he was very cool, but he was sort of like, yeah, he's like, I'm really uncomfortable with teaching, because he's like, I really don't know what I'm doing. He's like, I do, but I don't really, I don't know how to really like explain it or teach it. He's like, I
Right.
sort of have my own way that I do this stuff, and so so I said, well, I mean, we've had guest artists in the past that have not really understood about music or theory or any of that kind of stuff. And I was like, that's kind of my job. I'll explain. You do it, and I'll explain it. So
Right.
he was sort of like, so
You should have just told him that you had Buckethead there. He probably would have been like, "Oh, I'll be
yeah,
fine."
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they have a really interesting approach too to writing. I mean, I watched an interview with Tomas, and he was saying that a lot of times when they're writing, they're all sitting there with a laptop and they're programming drum beats, and then they're
Hmm.
they're coming up with these riffs that go along with the drum parts. But I mean, even him as a drummer, he's like one of the scariest drummers I've ever
Yeah,
heard. Oh my
he's
gosh.
awesome. Yeah.
I don't know how, like I saw that video of him doing Bleed live, and just picturing what his feet must feel like when that song is over, just that pattern going the whole time. I don't even know
I
how
can't
he
even
does that.
imagine. Yeah. That's a crazy, and I mean, when that came out, that was like a bomb for drummers, because I saw everybody putting up it was almost like the Bleed challenge or something, everybody trying to
Right,
play that double kick part to that thing, yeah, it's
right.
nuts.
Yeah. So I remember another thing back from the NGW days was I picked up your VHS tape, ironically, and
Yeah.
instructional book, Shred is Not Dead. And one of the things that, I mean, looking back on that after all these years now where I've studied jazz and stuff, I mean, from my perspective, that book is really exceptional in terms of like a shred guitar book, because some of the stuff that I saw in there, I've never seen really from any other shred guitarist, with stuff like the Japanese pentatonic scale, and you had some symmetric diminished stuff. And I even remember you did some like atonal arpeggios. So how did you get into incorporating some of those more exotic sounds into your playing?
Um, I think I don't know. I mean, it just, like I said, I think it's through listening to a bunch of stuff. I mean, again, at the core, I'm a absolute metal guy, and I would never pretend to be anything else. But I mean, that said, I really don't embrace that, like, I don't know what you want to call it, mentality, like 100%. I don't want to be a metal guy that listens to just the metal thing and then whatever. So I think just through listening to other things, I mean, it really kind of opened my ears to a bunch of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm certainly nowhere in the ballpark of a true whatever, a guy that actually plays jazz and understands that stuff or whatever, by a long shot, but I appreciate it. So hearing different scale choices and sort of even just conceptual ideas, like of playing to a chord rather than playing over like an entire progression, just a center of something,
Hmm.
was kind of an eye-opening thing for me.
Hmm. Did you ever
um,
study jazz at all?
I mean, sort of in a peripheral way at Berklee, because that's, Berklee, to me, at least at the time, I mean, Berklee is a jazz school.
Mm.
So you're going to get a lot of perspective. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the things that will be taught to you, like harmony, for instance, they're not going to give you an example from, Slayer or something for the Locrian scale or whatever. It's not like, well, this is the way this works. They
That'd be
go back.
awesome if they did.
I would have, yeah, I probably would have been a lot more invested, man, to be honest at the time. But but yeah, they teach things from the perspective of like, here's whatever the device is in harmony. Here's a 2-5-1. I mean, you don't really hear that often in metal, so they're gonna show you all the standards that like that thing happens in, and then subdominance, which again you don't hear that in metal so that much.
Mm.
So So you get that influence, I guess, is what I'm saying, you know, and they'll play this stuff. They'll say, here's, you know, whatever, Charlie Parker on the blah, blah, blah. And here, you know, you can hear him here, takes a solo, and yeah.
That's awesome. And then just
Yeah.
one other thing on the topic of just the Shred Is Not Dead book. Those are atonal arpeggios. How did you develop stuff like that?
Probably in a bunch of different ways. I don't know. Sometimes it literally is just like you kind of reverse engineer things, meaning that like I might come up with some kind of bizarre chord or something, you know, that I'm playing in the song or whatever, you know, like literally just like hands down on the neck. And then I'm like, what is this thing? And then kind of move your fingers around until it sounds like really sort of angular and whatever, you know. And then of course, when it comes time to solo over it, it's like, okay, well, you know, what I'm going to do to this thing? I'm like, I'm not going to play the pentatonic scale, at least not, you know, on top of the root of the thing. So you start figuring out what the notes in the chord actually are. You're like, okay, well, there's a flat 2, there's a sharp 5, there's, you know, whatever. And so then you come up with some sort of arpeggio based on some of the for me at least, the notes that would be crucial to that chord. You know, chord tones, obviously, or maybe the guide tones, but then on top of that, any kind of weirdness that would, you know, be in there, you know, any altered, you know, tensions or whatnot. And then you sort of just make an arpeggio up for it, I guess, is the best way to describe it, you know.
And then just like move it around, try to connect it with tonal stuff.
Yep. You can, I mean, once you figure it out, you can start to invert it or however, or, you know, I mean, basically for me, what I'll do is I'll come up with a positional type of thing in a lot of cases. And then I'll, you know, I hate to play an arpeggio like boop, boop, you know, straight up and straight down in the same way that you would hate to play a scale straight up or straight down, you know, you right. Figure out different ways to do it. So, I might break it up, you know, in octaves. So maybe I'll play the bottom octave, you know, and then I'll slide up in position or something. And then there's, you know, another octave higher in a higher position or something. And then, you know, then as you get to the top, I mean, of course you get all the wheedly wheedly with your right hand, you know, like you can play some taps and you're like, well, that's pretty cool. What if I did a 2-finger tap on top of this? And can I get the sharp 5 out of that? Yeah, I can, you know, and then before you know it,
you're off to the races.
something weird. Yeah, at least.
Yeah. I love it. So at a certain point in your life, you started having some issues with your ring finger and your pinky, I believe, which ended up being caused by something known as focal dystonia. So for people who aren't aware of that, what is that? And at what point did you suspect that it was going on with you?
Focal dystonia is a neurological condition, meaning that it is of your brain. The origin is in your brain, not a physical thing like a tendonitis or repetitive stress type of thing. And I guess basically what it is a somehow through playing really fast, repetitive things, your brain remaps the way that it sends a signal to your finger. So when you want to move your finger, it doesn't move, or vice versa. And for me, I discovered it, I think probably about back in 1989. I remember like sitting at the guitar one day and then trying to play. I was working out some big Shawn Lane stretching kind of stuff, you know, these arpeggios that are string skipped and like, you know, like bunches of whole steps in between your fingers or whatever. And the day before I was playing them pretty well, you know, and you just have this, and I'm sure you know this, but you just sort of have this physical feeling in your hands, like when you're locked into something, you know, your fingers just sort of lock into the thing, for lack of a better description to it, you know. And it wasn't doing that. My little finger wasn't coming down. It just felt really weird and like I couldn't get enough pressure on it or something like that. And so that kind of just went on for a while and then, you know, got a little bit worse. And finally I went to a specialist. I think it was like right around 1994, down in New York City when I was down there. And specialist said that they thought it was a nerve issue, because at that time they didn't really know a lot about focal dystonia, the doctors. So he said he thought it was a nerve issue, and you know that's kind of where we left it. And I was like, well, I really don't want to, you know, deal with it right now. I can still play and whatever. And then it got worse over the years. So I went back around, I don't know when it was, maybe 2002 or something like that, and saw another doctor. And this one knew a little bit more. And she said, yeah, this is I think this is what it is. She's like, but you know, there's a guy that's like the guru of all this stuff. And, you know, he said Columbia Hospital, whatever. So you go up there and check in with him. I did. And he gave me the diagnosis and he said, yeah, it's, you know, it's what it is. And at the time, and I think it's still kind of this way because they still don't know a lot about it. But he had said I went into it thinking a little bit positive because I'd heard some success stories from different people or whatever. And, the doctors sort of didn't really have a lot of great news about it.
Mm.
He said, we don't really have a lot of treatment and there's certainly no cure for it. So he's like, there are certain things that we can do. But it involved definitely a lot of, needles and MRIs and all this kind of stuff that I really sort of have an issue with. So I just kind of let it go again. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna, whatever. But I think it's definitely been getting worse now again. So I'm gonna maybe go back and seek some kind of advice about it, or get some tests run or whatever.
So is it something that kind of comes and goes?
No, it's there all the time.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, yep, it's there all the time, and it's just progressive. So it just gets kind of worse and worse and worse, over the years.
And when it initially happened, was it only happening with your pinky?
Yeah, initially it was pretty much the pinky, and then subsequently it's kind of got into the third finger as well, so that I have a real hard time using those fingers. And it's really strange. I mean, the best way that I can describe it is what I would imagine somebody that maybe has something like a stroke or something like that, where they lose the ability to move their leg or their arm or something like that. It kind of feels a little bit like that. And obviously a much more small way. It's not quite that horrible or whatever, but it just doesn't want to come down. It doesn't want to move. I can still move my hands. Everything is cool, and you can use my hand to do things. But the minute that I try to put it on the guitar and play certain things, it's just there. I can't generate any kind of pressure, like strength, for the thing to come down. And won't move like it's supposed to.
So it's almost like a guitar specific thing. It doesn't really affect any
Yeah.
other area of your life.
Yeah, that's what they say. They call it task specific, which means that whenever you do that certain thing that provoked it in the first place, that's you can't.
And that's only on it doesn't affect your right hand at all?
No, fortunately, my right hand's been okay.
Mm-hmm. And do
So
they think it could have had something to do with practicing for like 10 hours and stuff like that?
yeah, that's what they say. There's two components to it. One is that you need to have a genetic predisposition. So everybody that hears this or whatever doesn't need to be fearful if they're practicing 12 hours a day and playing their arpeggios at 5 million miles an hour. There's a genetic predisposition that supposedly plays a role in it. And then also beyond that, then the thing that aggravates it from that point is that you do play very fast, repetitive things for long periods of time, over and over again. And that sort of, as you're doing that, your brain gets all kind of, weird messages to it, I guess, or whatever. And then it remaps.
That's wild. I mean, if
Yeah.
it means anything to you, I mean, if you've had this for over 30 years, I mean, to me, as a listener, I don't think it's affected your playing at all. I mean, every time you post a YouTube video, I'm just blown away by your playing. So if that means anything to you, I think
It
your playing
means
is
a
still
lot,
top
Mike.
notch.
Yeah, well, it means a lot, man. Thank you. I do really appreciate that. So it's been the biggest struggle for me, I think, is just that I know what I'm capable of and what's in my head, and I can't, do that thing. So that's the biggest struggle, I think.
Right. And then one thing that you had mentioned when I took my last lesson with you was you were saying how when it initially, I don't know if it was initially when you did this, but at a certain point you started developing more of tapping technique to kind of work around it.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of exercises were you doing as far as just kind of working around that, getting more of the tapping stuff going?
I don't think I really did many exercises per se. But what I did was I just started to kind of redo everything that I had previously done, like as a, legato passage or something like that, or even just a pick passage. I can't really do 3-note per string stuff so much, particular certain combinations or whatever. So those combinations that I used to do that were easy or part of, the repertoire, what I would do, I would just use my right hand to come down and play the third, note. So it took a little while to kind of get used to that. I had to, sort of awkward at first. And then of course, anytime you're doing that, at least for me, I mean, I have the hammer on from nowhere. Like that was kind of a weird thing at first, where you just hammer your left hand first finger down to start the next, string. There's no striking of the pick or any of that kind of business.
Will you use a string dampener when you're doing that?
Yeah. Years later, I discovered that. And it's been helpful for that kind of stuff, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know any other like guitar players that have this?
Yeah, a ton, man. I've heard from a lot of people to be having this. A lot of people write and say, hey, because I mean, it's definitely a club that nobody wants to be in, but
Right.
once you're there, it's sort of like, we're all like, I mean, anybody that says like, hey, I tried this and it actually worked, everybody's like, yeah, okay. So unfortunately, I don't really have usually a lot of great news to give anybody because I haven't had really any success with much. I did take some lessons from a guitar player down in New York by the name of David Leisner, who's a classical guitar player that had focal dystonia. I believe it was in his right hand,
Oh,
um, and he managed to get himself out of it, and he's playing back at concert level and all this kind of stuff. And so he has a method that he uses, which I sort of understood what he was saying, and I valued the lessons and and whatever, but I don't know that it really worked for me so much. Although I still have some of the ideas in my head, and I try to implement them as I practice now. But
mm,
also there's been a ton of people over the years. One person that had written a bunch of years ago that we sort of had a friendship developed over the years is Chris Linsner from Necrophagus Obscura fame, as a sort of a tech, metal, over the top shred guy or whatever.
mm.
And he was having issues with his second finger. So we talked a lot about it, and I think looks like he's hanging on pretty well now. I think it's, certainly plays great. So there's that,
Mm.
but he's been touring, and nothing's really slowed him down either. So,
Nice.
yep.
That's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, I don't notice anything with your playing. I think your playing is as good as it's ever been. And I played my girlfriend a video of you the other night because I told her we were doing this interview, and I told her about the condition. And I was like, he can't really use his pinky if you watch him he's playing. And she's like, I can't. If I didn't see that, I wouldn't have noticed anything. You know what I mean? Your
Yeah.
playing is so top notch. So,
No,
if that
thank you,
means
Mike.
anything, yeah.
No, it does,
Um,
man. I really appreciate it.
no, no worries. All right, I have one deep question for you. So I know you had a kid recently. How old is your kid now?
He's 5.
5. Okay. So
Yeah.
what's your favorite part about being a father?
um, I don't know. That's a great question. Um,
Or the biggest thing you've learned maybe through being a father?
I mean, there's so many things, I guess. I don't know. I think that it's just it brings I mean, not to sound cliche or whatever, but it really, I mean, honestly, it brings a certain uh joy and happiness, um, to life that just wasn't there, that you didn't know that you needed, I guess,
Right.
before that. And then all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and you're like, hey, I'm gonna go downstairs, or I'm gonna, go get my dude, and we're gonna go do stuff. So
Right.
yeah, it's mind blowing in a lot of ways, and it's definitely life changing for sure. But it can be very difficult. Um, but I wouldn't trade any of that. I mean,
Hmm.
he's freaking awesome.
Did you plan on having kids?
Not really, man.
Hmm.
I always kind of wanted them, I guess, but didn't really plan on it. And then and it's sort of I'm kind of late to the game because I mean, most people have kids like probably about 10 years before I do. But it sort of happened, and I was like, yeah, you know,
Hmm.
outside of me being extremely tired all the time, and not being able to be like, I don't know, dad that's like chasing him around the house 24 hours a day. I mean, I was up for it for sure. I was ready for it.
Nice. Well, you can sweep pick, so I think that makes you a cool dad. You know. You-
That's the requisite, right?
yeah.
Can you
Um,
sweep it?
yeah. Exactly. So here for the end of the interview, I just kind of have a list of just some quick questions I want to ask you, just to kind of get to know some of your preferences with certain things. So, if you some of these might be a little bit tricky, so if you don't have specific answers, that's fine. But do you have 3 favorite albums?
Mm, man, that's a hard question, Mike.
You
Um,
can name more than 3.
I don't even know, man. I mean, off the top of my head, if like I had to have albums on a desert island, I mean,
Hmm.
there's, I mean, and it's kind of a tricky question too, because like there's some albums that have been hugely influential on me.
Right.
But if I could only have a few albums, I don't know if that would be, strangely enough, I don't know if that would be the album that I would have there. So yeah, I don't really know, man. Definitely King's X, Scratch and Ghost in Nebraska, I think was a huge album for me. Like I said before, the early Ozzy stuff for just getting me totally motivated on guitar was huge. Yngwie's early stuff, first Racer X album, probably any Holdsworth album. Michael Hedges was another huge influence, and I've been just absolutely love the stuff. Meshuga, the early stuff. I mean, even you know, people laugh, but Andreas Vollenweider for me, like I don't know if you even know who that is. He's a new age harpist.
Okay.
You'll hear it and you'll be like, wow, this is really, you'll be like, man, this is like really like hot tub music or something. But it was profoundly influential on a lot of the writing stuff, I think, for me. So yeah, strangely enough, it's a little bit, I mean, from what I gather, like hanging out with, you know, some more fusion oriented people, it's a little bit more like, you know, the Kenny G thing, I guess, you know, but
yeah. Oh, really?
but
I'll have to check it out. I mean, I love harp. I mean, harp is a fascinating instrument, especially seeing it in person when someone plays it. I mean, it's mind blowing. I don't know what they're doing.
He was the first guy that I don't know if he invented it or whatever, but he was the first guy to really use the electric harp. So and I love his music. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, and I don't know. There's so many things, man. So many things.
That's great. I mean, there are plenty there. Well, this next one will probably be just as hard. But do you have a top 3 favorite guitar players?
Man, that's a tough one to pick too. Yeah, I mean, I gotta say that probably Yngwie and Holdsworth would be in there for me. Yeah, that's so hard, man. There's so many guitar players. I mean, you know, yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question.
That's fine. Yngwie and Holdsworth. Did Yngwie ever go to NGW?
No. Well, he went to the Florida campus. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I heard some great stories about that one too. Maybe we'll save for another time. But yeah, he went to the Florida. Dave Martone and James Hogan, who we mentioned before, they were the guys on that gig at the time, and they told me all about it.
Nice. Yeah, I bet they have a lot of stories about that.
Yeah.
All right, these next few will probably be a little bit easier. What's your favorite Pink Floyd album?
Favorite Pink Floyd album? Yeah, that's a tough one too, man. I mean, out of all of them, I guess I probably have to go with Dark Side. But I mean, The Wall certainly has been a huge influence on me. I love that album, and I love Wish You Were Here as well. Those 3 for me are probably the biggest. And then, you know, I mean, I love the other stuff too. I love metal. I love even the early Syd Barrett stuff. I think is cool. There's some neat stuff about it.
Yeah, I got to
Dark
listen
Side
to more of that Syd Barrett.
Yeah, it's crazy. Some of the stuff is crazy, but you know, but yeah.
Cool. How about Led Zeppelin? Favorite Led Zeppelin album?
Led Zeppelin. My favorite Led Zeppelin album, I think, has always been. I mean, it was Zeppelin. It sort of fluctuates. It's tough because, like, when you're like, that's my favorite, and then you go and you listen to another one, you're like, oh my god, yeah, that's so great too, you know. But I think Houses of the Holy has always been. Yeah. It's always been kind of up there for me, you know.
Yeah, same. Well, it's definitely their most proggy album.
I think there's just so many cool like moments that go all over the place on that album, you know, that it's so diverse and so interesting to me, you know, and it just comes in like right off the top, you know, gangbusters with Song Remains the Same and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Zeppelin 4 is probably not too far behind that.
I love the Crunch. That's on Houses of the Holy.
Yeah.
Right? That's like one of my favorite grooves in 9. It just sounds so natural. You can't even tell that it's in 9. Amazing. Yeah,
well, I mean, those guys were and Floyd too, man, and the Beatles actually, you know, their predecessor. I mean, those guys were all like just masters at like, you know, sneaking in the odd time stuff. And you're like, wow, you know, I'm singing along to this song and it's great, and it's, you know, the riff is just rocking and you're bobbing your head, and all of a sudden, like, you realize, you know, it's in whatever, like The Ocean's like that, right? You know, that's on that same album. You know, it's like,
right.
You know.
Yeah, and then All You Need Is Love. I think that's 7, right? And it's so amazing too, because I've noticed just from teaching kids, a lot of kids tend to gravitate towards the Beatles. That's one of the older groups that you can get kids into, and it's amazing. You hear them singing along to All You Need Is Love. I'm like, the Beatles are like the only group that can have kids singing a song in 7.
Totally, man. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's crazy. Like you realize like exactly what, you know, like, and I think that's the beauty of the way that those bands do it. And that to me was a big lesson too for the odd time stuff. It's like, it shouldn't be about the chalkboard as much as it should be about, you know, just for the song. Like, what does it sound like
Right.
for the song? What is it supposed to do, you know? And before you know it, like, you're listening to the music, you're not listening to the device, you know? And you hear that music and you're just like, this is great. You're singing along. And like you said, the kids are singing along and everything. And then all of a sudden when you, it's like, there's a little like musician voice in the back of your head. It's like, hey, wait a second. What is that? And you're like,
Right.
something strange here, you know, spider sense is tingling. And you're like, oh, wow, this isn't Sabbath. Holy crap.
Yeah,
Nice.
exactly. Do you have a favorite Beatles album?
That would be probably Sergeant Pepper.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, Sergeant Pepper.
When it took the psychedelic turn.
That's when, yeah, things got a little strange for those guys, and it was beautiful, a beautiful thing.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Meshuga? Do you have a favorite Meshuga album?
Meshuga's tough too, man, because I've really enjoyed all the periods of Meshuga. I mean, I got in right around DEI, so that was my first Meshuga album and my first experience, you know, with those guys. And
Is that the second album?
It would have been might have been the third album, I think. I'm trying to think because they did
Contradictions Collapse.
Contradictions Collapse, and one other one before that, I think.
Oh, they did? Okay.
Yeah, there were 2 albums before. I think it was either 2, might have been 3 albums before that. I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
It sort of gets lost in the annals of time because it's like, well, you know, they did an album and it didn't have this guy on it and that guy. And because if you listen to them back then, it was actually a lot different. You know,
that first album would surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah, you could sort of hear it. I think it was Contradictions Collapse. You could start to hear the style come in, but then on DEI, like it was sort of fully realized. You're like, okay, yeah, this is something different, you know. But before that, it was almost like, you know, kind of a different version of like a Metallica-ish, you know, type of thing, me at least, you know. And
when I first heard it, it instantly sounded like early Metallica to me.
Yeah, it was kind of like
mix and yeah.
Yeah, like that whole scene, man, that whole sort of the, you know, 80s thrash metal kind of stuff, you know, and I was like, wow, really? Because I came backwards at it, right? And then, you know, when of course, when Destroy, Erase, Improve came out, it was like, you know, like I said, it was something from Mars. It was like, holy crap, like, it was really interesting to hear that kind of thing happen, like where the band does this thing, and then all of a sudden, you know, like on the next album, it's like, what did these guys do? Like, I mean, it's not even like it's kind of a gradual like progression into this thing. It's like they totally got onto some other trip, and it's awesome.
Yeah, they're incredible. I think they might have an album coming out in 2020. I've heard rumors about it. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't really heard anything. I hope so. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a couple more. So do you listen to podcasts by any chance?
Not a ton. I actually did a podcast for many years, but I haven't really listened.
You had your own podcast?
I did, yeah. A friend of myself, and we're planning on resurrecting it, but we'll see what happens.
Oh, is it still accessible online?
Yeah, I think so. It's called I can't even speak. The Musicians Lab.
Oh, okay. I'll look that up.
That
sounds awesome.
We had a bunch of special guests, some of them from the workshop. We had James on there and Harry Jacobson, a couple other people, and just talk about weird stuff like, you know, the highest singing that has ever happened in history, I think was one, you know, I can't even remember.
Man of War?
I forget who we determined it was, but we had plenty of examples. I think it was maybe like, off the top of my head, I remember we had some Aha, I think was in there from that band from the 80s from Sweden that did Take On Me.
Yeah.
Boston.
Wait, you mean high in terms of the pitch or like, the volume?
What is the actual highest pitch that a guy has sung in rock music or pop music, you know? Or girlfriend.
I think volume-wise, I think Manowar, I saw some show one time, it was like the world records, and maybe it's been broken, but I think at one point Manowar had the record for like whoever the singer is in that singing the loudest. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I love that stuff.
So did you guys do that podcast? Was this like before podcasts had kind of blown up?
I think so. Yeah, we did it probably, man, I don't even know, 10 years ago at this point. It's been a while.
You should bring it back because I mean, podcasts are huge now. I feel like within the past few years, I mean, I didn't even know what a podcast was 5 or 6 years ago, and now like, everybody listens to them. So you should totally bring it back.
No, we're definitely thinking about it because we had a lot of fun doing the stuff. So so we're thinking about doing it. I would definitely, that's on the radar. Let's put it that way. I'd love to.
That's awesome. Great. We've got a podcast and an album on the radars. That's very exciting. So here, do you have a favorite movie?
It's got to be either, well, I'd say like not even just movie, but like franchise. I would say either the Star Wars or the Lord of the Rings movies.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
Into the
not
fantasy
including
stuff.
the last three Star Wars movies.
The ones that like had just gotten released.
Yeah, I sort of. I mean, that's a whole nother a subject for an entirely different podcast, Mike.
Yeah,
But you know,
I don't know anything about Star Wars, so I wouldn't be able to
yeah,
contribute. I saw the original three, like the old three,
yeah,
way back in the day. I should probably rewatch them, but it's been a long time.
yeah. Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. Yep.
Nice. And then are you a gamer? Do you play video games?
I'm a huge gamer. Yes.
That's what I thought. Like, is your YouTube name, is that from a video game?
It's one of my characters, yeah, or it's something close to one of my characters, I think.
Which game is that?
It is World of Warcraft, I believe, is one of the
Oh,
characters.
okay.
Something close to that. Yeah. So I've been
Nice.
playing that for ages. I know it's not so cool anymore, but I mean, it feels like a second home to me at this point. So
Yeah, I remember people used to get addicted to that game when I was in
yeah,
high school. There would be kids that would be staying up for like 24 hours at a time playing World of Warcraft.
used to be a big thing. Yeah, used
Yeah.
to be a big
So you
thing.
still play a lot of
Yeah,
games?
when I can, man. I get a bunch of tunes that I'll go on and on Noobs and Warsong Gulch and all that and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been good. We do that. My family kind of got me hooked on Minecraft because I was a big Legos kid. When I was a
Mm.
little kid. So now I'm like in whatever free time I'm like watching videos about. And the problem with me is that like I take the guitar thing to like the other stuff, right? So like with Warcraft, for instance, like back in the day, I was in a raiding guild and like I'd want to get the highest DPS and do my job like whatever to the maximum capacity, and so I'd be sitting here with like spreadsheets, like itemizing gear and like plugging in my stats and trying to figure
Right.
everything out and like that kind of stuff. Same with
So just like,
Minecraft. I'm like
yeah.
watching all these guys build stuff. I'm like, all right, well, let me see, like, how you made this castle this way. So if I
So you mean in terms of just kind of like the obsessive nature?
yeah, like obsessive compulsive whatever.
Yeah, I'm
It
the
is. I
same
don't
way.
know.
I get
Yeah,
that from my dad. I mean, if anything I get
yeah,
into, usually it's mostly music, but if I get into something, I get obsessed. I need to know
yeah,
everything, like
100
inside and
100%.
out. And it could be good. I think it could be bad sometimes too, but for the most part, I think it works for the good. I hope at
I think
least.
it's I think it's a good thing, man. I think it's being I mean, maybe not spending like, all your life and ruining everything else. It's probably a bad thing, but
Right.
as long as you keep it in check, I mean, I feel like being passionate about something, and throwing yourself into it, to you don't want to do it. I mean, you want to do it well, you want to enjoy it, you want to be there in the moment, So
Right. Exactly.
yeah,
And when you have that passion too, I mean, God forbid if anything happened to any of us where we couldn't play guitar anymore, hopefully you can take that passion and figure out a way to transfer it to something else.
yeah, yep.
So, I mean, this next question, you kind of answered it for me, but maybe you have some other things. What other things do you like to do besides music and gaming?
Um, well, at this point, I don't really have the option to do a lot of
Right.
things,
Well,
but
yeah, before having a kid.
yeah, but I definitely was into biking most of my life. Not motorbiking, but like I raced BMX and all that kind of stuff, and then that sort of translated into mountain biking as an adult.
Hmm.
So love doing that stuff. Haven't in a while, but I once again, it's one of those things that's on the radar that I plan to get back into doing that stuff. Same thing with working out. I love to do that for years. Just I don't know, it was a passion. So
Mhm.
again, haven't done that in a while, so that's on the radar.
Nice.
um, yeah, I don't know, bunch of little weird things like that, I guess.
That's good. That's
Um,
good stuff.
yeah,
So speaking of on the radar, so when is the new album expected to drop?
I do not know, man. We're in the process right now. Super amped about how it's coming out so far. So we have most of the drum tracks done, some of the bass tracks done. Most of my guitar is finished up. So I'm waiting on some of the other people that are going to be playing on it to do their stuff. Um, and then I've got to just find some other instruments. I need probably going to have tabla on this one as well, and I need a gypsy violin player. So I'm going to try to hunt those people down and try to make that happen during the lockdown, the pandemic. Hopefully
Mhm.
I can, because people aren't really doing sessions right now. So all this
Yeah, I
work,
was gonna say, are you tracking everything on your own?
yeah, everybody's doing the stuff from home.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the people that are doing the thing, they have their own setups, So
What program do you use to record at home?
I have Logic Audio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I
Nice.
use that.
Does the album have a name?
So far, I'm pretty sure that the name is going to be Story.
Cool. Awesome. Great. Well, I'm very excited to hear that. And like I said, I mean, I appreciate all the inspiration that I've gotten from you over the years. And I think your playing is still, as good as ever. And I highly recommend anybody that doesn't know Terry, please check out his stuff. I mean, he's truly an exceptional guitar player. And I'll include links in the description and in the comment section to your YouTube channel, and then any albums that are accessible online. And yeah, just thanks again. I really appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate it as well. It's always great to see you, of course, and appreciate you being interested and asking me to do this. It's been really fun. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again, and I will we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, Mike.
All right, thanks. Take care.